Welcome, dear devotees. I am so pleased to welcome you all to this 10-part series on the 9 processes of bhakti, of which today is the ninth session. I'm so pleased to welcome His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Swami, who will speak for approximately 60 minutes on Sakhyam, or becoming friends with the Lord, or serving the Lord in the mood of friendship. Maharaj, everyone knows Maharaj, and I'll be very brief to say he's universally beloved for his genuine caring, deep wisdom, and the way he delivers the ancient wisdom of the sacred bhakti texts. He's not traveling like he would before COVID struck and is based in Belgaum. And one of his projects is Gokul Dham, which is an eco village outside of Belgaum that he is developing. So before I hand over to Maharaj, I would just like to request everyone, as usual, if you have questions for Maharaj, because we'll do a half-hour Q&A session at the end of Maharaj's talk. So if you have any questions, please send them through to me, Yashoda Dulal Das, on the Zoom chat, and I will curate the questions, put together like-minded or like-themed questions, and ask Maharaj on your behalf. With that, I would like to request Maharaj to enlighten us, and the microphone is yours, Maharaj.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. I'm very happy to be with all of you at the Bhakti Center, New York. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you again. It's been a while since I have been with you. And these are indeed very turbulent times, not only because of COVID, but I think even currently you're going through some excitement in America, I believe. And I do hope everything gets resolved in whichever way it needs to get. But whatever it may be, material circumstances will always change. But Krishna consciousness remains the eternal reality. Therefore, through the ups and downs of life and through the various eventful circumstances of our day and age, Krishna consciousness can never be compromised. It has to go on. I'm very happy that the Bhakti Center has been organizing this series of lectures on the 9-fold processes of devotional service. And I believe you've already had 7 or 8 lectures before this. Today I will be speaking on the topic of Sakhyam, which is the 8th of the 9 processes. Dasyam Sakhyam Atmanivedanam. Sakhyam means friendship. So remember, here we're talking of friendship in relationship to the Supreme Lord. Because the verse, the 23rd verse from the 5th chapter of the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atmanivedanam. So the word Vishnu is important here. So this ninefold process, these ninefold types of activities pertain to the Supreme Lord alone. That is what is being discussed here. So in Sakhyam, we're going to speak about friendship with the Lord. Now, the first thing that comes to our mind when we think of friendship with the Lord is the name of famous devotees in that mood, like Arjuna with Krishna. Now, each of these nine types of devotional service, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, have an exemplar, which means that they have some personality who has exemplified the execution or performance of that particular limb of devotional service and has attained perfection simply by doing that one limb of devotional service. So for Shravanam, it is Parikshit Maharaj, for Kirtanam, it is Shukadev Maharaj, and so on. So for Sakhyam, it is Arjuna. So when we hear Sakhyam in relationship to the Lord, we think of Arjuna. And naturally, as devotees of Krishna in Vrindavan, we also immediately think of the cowherd boys of Vrindavan. Now the question may arise in our mind that what to speak of the cowherd boys of Vrindavan? Arjuna as well, who was outside of Vrindavan. They're all eternal associates of the Lord. They're certainly not ordinary practicing devotees like us. It's one thing for them to be in a mood of friendship with the Lord. How does one sadhaka, who is a sadhaka means a practitioner, who is following the path of sadhana bhakti, devotional service in practice, how does he or she actually practice this path of being friendly with the Lord? What does it mean? We are cautioned on several occasions that we should follow rules and regulations within the temple. You know, you can't be too familiar with the deity because the deity has to be worshipped in some kind of a mood of awe and reverence, almost in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan. If we are frivolous or whimsical in terms of our dealings with the deities, that is considered an offense. It's called a seva aparad. And Srila Prabhupada has outlined many of them in the Nectar of Devotion. So how can ordinary devotees like us practice this principle of friendship with the Lord? Now, certainly, we have in mind great friends of Krishna like Arjuna or the cowherd boys of Vrindavan, but they seem at such a high level that it might seem a little daunting for us. And we might be perplexed about how we can actually practice this principle. Now, in the Nectar of Devotion, or the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami has outlined and briefly described 64 items or elements of sadhana bhakti, devotional service in practice. And particularly, they pertain to Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, which means performing devotional service in practice by strictly following rules and regulations given by the spiritual master and given in the scriptures. So therefore, these 64 items are especially to be performed by devotees doing Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. And naturally, all these items also continue on in the next stage of sadhana bhakti, which is called Raganuga sadhana bhakti, wherein one now is in the stage of practice, but one is spontaneous in one's devotion to the Lord. And then one reaches a stage called bhava, the stage of transcendental emotions. And finally, the topmost stage, which is called Prema Bhakti, the stage of pure love of Godhead. So when we speak of Arjuna and the Brajabasi cowherd boys, we are speaking of the level of Prema. And now we're on the level of sadhana. And in this supremely magnificent text of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami has given guidelines for us ordinary devotees. Amongst these 64 items of bhakti, one of them, the 48th, is devotional service in friendship. So those of you who have the nectar of devotion with you or have easy access to it, you may open up to chapter 11. And you will find, just turn one page and you will find devotional service in friendship. In the Sanskrit text of Rupa Goswami, this is referred to as Vishvasa Mitra Vittishcha Sakhyam Dvividham Iritam. So this Sakhyam, this friendship with Dvividham is of two types. Which two? Vishvasa and Mitra. So Vishwas means faith, staunch faith. And Mitra means to be an ordinary friend. So how does this relate to us as ordinary devotees? So let's discuss that. So Srila Prabhupada explains it very nicely here that devotional service and friendship can be divided into two categories. The first is to act as a confidential servant of the Lord, and the other is to act as a well-wisher of the Lord. In other words, Vishwas, which means strong faith, implies that one should act as a servitor of the Lord, and one should actually have strong faith and confidence that the Lord is one's benefactor. So this is what it means for us to be engaging with Krishna in the mood of Sakhya, even at our ordinary stage of development in devotional service. So we have to have staunch faith that Krishna is our real well-wisher, our real benefactor, and therefore we must serve him to our best capacity. And the other is to act as a well-wisher of the Lord. So we'll first talk about the one that is Vishwas. The devotee who has confidence in devotional service to the Lord, Srila Prabhupada says, systematically follows the rules and regulations with faith that he will achieve the platform of transcendental life. So Vishwas, acting in friendship, in Sakhya, with respect to the Lord at our stage of development means to simply faithfully follow the rules and regulations of devotional service with the confidence that one will attain the transcendental platform at some point in time, whenever Krishna feels the time is right. Now, Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami actually has given the example of Draupadi here. And in the Mahabharata, and Prabhupada cites this verse here as well, the Pandavas went through so many tribulations. Their life was full of difficulties. If anybody thinks that after coming to devotional service, we will not have, no, not yet. It's not yet. Yeah, sorry. So when Draupadi has gone through, along with the other Pandavas, has gone through so many miseries. And anyone who thinks that when they come to devotional life, it's going to be a bed of roses is not true. Because Krishna will put in so many challenges into our life, one after the other, relentless onslaught of crisis and challenges and difficulties and so on, all so that we and others may progress in Krishna consciousness. But the Pandavas in particular went through such a difficult time. So Draupadi in the Mahabharata says, Pratigyatava Govinda Name Bhaktaha Pranashyati Iti Samsmritya Pranandharayam Yaham. She says, my dear Krishna, Pratigyatava, it has been, O Govinda, it has been, you have made your promise. Name Bhaktaha Pranashyati, that your devotee will never perish. So I simply keep remembering this promise of yours. Iti samspritya samspritya. And it is only by repeatedly remembering this promise of yours that somehow or the other, I'm able to hold my life airs within my body and sustain my life. So this is Draupadi's statement. And Srila Prabhupada explains here that Draupadi and her 5 husbands were put into such severe tribulations by the Kauravas that even Bhishma, who was such a powerful warrior and a great devotee, shed tears thinking of them. And he was always surprised that though the Pandavas were so righteous and Draupadi was practically like the goddess of fortune, still they had to go through this kind of misery. And even though their tribulations were extraordinary, Draupadi was not discouraged, Srila Prabhupada says. She knew that because Krishna was their friend, ultimately they would be saved. So here we see the example of Draupadi having staunch faith, even in the midst of the greatest of tribulations, that Krishna was their friend and Krishna would protect them. Krishna is their benefactor. So similarly, we should also have this kind of faith that Krishna actually is our real well-wisher, our benefactor, our protector, and so on. Now, I started off this section of the Nectar of Devotion by speaking about how this is especially meant for those on the platform of at least sadhana bhakti, if not Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. But Draupadi is not an ordinary practicing devotee. She is a perfected devotee. She's a pure devotee. She's an associate of the Lord. So how is it that we can equate our situation with Draupadi's? How can we relate to her situation? So it's very interesting that the Acharyas explain that even though Draupadi is an associate of the Lord and is on the platform of prema, her statement is the result of prema and not of of sadhana. And still it is used as an example because the devotees on the level of prema sometimes come down to the level of sadhana, just to facilitate the Lord's pastime, just to be able to participate in the Lord's pastime, because the Lord has many purposes to fulfill through his devotees. He wants to send out a strong message to generations and generations of devotees to come. That look, here is how a devotee should deal with tribulations. So even though Draupadi is not to be considered a sadhana bhakti, even though her example comes here as an illustration of something that a sadhaka should be thinking of, we should know, as per Jiva Goswami, that she's doing it by, so to speak, coming to a level that may appear to be like sadhana. Also, it's important that this kind of vishwas, the service, the concept that Krishna is a benefactor, like all the other limbs of devotional service that are mentioned here in the Nectar of Devotion, they continue on eternally. For example, hearing about the Lord, remembering the Lord, these are part of the 64 items of sadhana bhakti. But it doesn't mean that when one reaches bhava bhakti or prema bhakti, that one will give these up and one will start something new. No, it is these very items that will continue on, even at the stage of bhava and prema, and even on the level of prema, when one gets to the spiritual world, then the hearing and chanting of the Lord, remembering Him, etc., will go on. In fact, the higher one progresses in devotional service, the better and more intense will be the performance or the execution of all these limbs of devotional service. So the spirit of friendship in terms of Vishwas, in terms of having staunch faith that Krishna is the benefactor, will just intensify more and more and more. So in this way, feeling, being the confidential servant of the Lord, and understanding that the Lord is our benefactor is the first type of devotional service in Sakhyam, in friendship. Rupa Goswami has given another example here, and that is from the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, text 53, and I'll just read the translation. One of the 9 Yogendras addresses King Nimi and says, a person who never deviates even for a moment from engagement in service at the lotus feet of the Supreme Person, engagement which is sought even by great demigods like Indra, with firm conviction, which is sought even by great demigods like, which is engagement which is sought even by great demigods like Indra, with firm conviction that there is nothing more worshipable or desirable than this, is called a first-class devotee. In other words, such a devotee is very fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, does not deviate even for a moment, with the idea that there is nothing more worshipable or desirable than serving the Supreme Lord. So actually, because when one serves Krishna favorably, it is a kind of a friendly mood. And also because in that friendly mood, there is strong faith that Krishna is our benefactor. So this is considered a type of Sakhyam, a kind of devotional service in Sakhyam, even though it is at the stage of sadhana, even perhaps at the stage of Vaidhi sadhana bhakti. Now, the second type of devotional service and friendship, which is mentioned here, is Maitri. Now, Srila Prabhupada describes this here, quote, the second type of devotional friendship is to become a well-wisher of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord accepts a preacher as their most dear servant. Anyone who is preaching the confidential message of the Gita to the people in general is so dear to Krishna that no one can be equal to him in human society. This is interesting. So here we have an example of mitra, which is a kind of closer friendship in which the devotee actually becomes like a well-wisher of the Lord. In the first instance of friendship, the devotee understands that the Lord is my well-wisher, but now the friendship becomes intensified and the devotee starts thinking of himself as the well-wisher of the Lord. In this, and of course, the Lord is not dependent on the devotee, but this is how he starts thinking. So this is a very interesting way of looking at it. Also, Jiva Goswami says that mitra here means friendship in general, rather than the Sakhya Sthai Bhav that appears only in Bhava and Prema. So we are talking of ordinary devotional friendship, not the friendship of Arjuna and even further higher, the friendship of the cowherd boys of Vrindavan. And this tendency is described in the 14th chapter of the 10th canto. To identify with such a position of general friendship is Sakhyam. Aho bhagyam nanda gopa prajau kusam Yan mitram paramanandam. So this mitra paramanandam is what is Sakhyam here. So Brahma is praying in his prayers there. Aho bhagyam, aho bhagyam. You know, how fortunate, Vrajaukasam, these residents of Vrindavan, how fortunate are they? Aho bhagyam, Nanda Gopa Vrajaukasam. Yan mitram paramanandam. So the Supreme Absolute Truth has become their friend. So they are extremely fortunate. They're living in a spirit of such friendship. So to identify such a position of general friendship is Sakhyam. So this is how Jiva Goswami has explained this. And also further, Srila Prabhupada clarifies that when we speak of Vishwas, we're speaking of staunch friendship or of staunch faith, I beg your pardon. The faith that a devotee has in the very early stages is ordinarily called Shraddha. Although the word Shraddha can have many connotations and it can be used even for people at the highest level. Um, but specifically in this context, Shraddha is something that we experience in the very beginning. Ado Shraddha Tatah Sadhu Sangha, and so on. And when that preliminary Shraddha or faith becomes staunch, it's called Vishwas. And it is in this state of Vishwas that one actually feels a sense of friendship, to the Lord. Now, also in the example of Maitri, the second stage, Prabhupada says here, gives the example that he also gives incidentally in the purport to the verse, 23rd verse of the 5th chapter of the 7th canto, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. In that he mentions the Agastya Samhita. And in the last paragraph of this section of the Nectar of Devotion that I'm reading now, also this is a quote actually from the Agastya Samhita. And I'll read, quote, sometimes it is found that a pure devotee lies down in the temple of the Lord in order to serve him as a confidential friend. Such friendly behavior of a devotee may be accepted as raganuga or spontaneous. Although according to regulative principles, no one can lie down in the temple of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this spontaneous love of Godhead may be grouped under devotional service in friendship. This is a quote actually from the Agastya Samhita, the same text that Srila Prabhupada quotes in his purport to Sakhyam in 7.5.23. So in this way, we've got a glimpse of what devotional service in friendship or Sakhyam at the stage of sadhana bhakti for our level of devotion actually means. It's interesting now to go on to the perfected stage of devotion. And I'd like to show you some slides because you know that there are 5 rasas, yes? And these 5 rasas have been compared to the 5 elements, the gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether. So I have a text, a small PPT, a small drawing of that. So that will give us an indication. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Give me a moment, please. We're working out. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. Next. So, when the creation is made, we have these 5 gross elements, yes? There are many other elements as well. The most subtle of the gross elements is ether. And ether has the element of sound. The next element is air, which is a little grosser compared to ether, that has the element of touch. Air has touch plus sound. So it has the quality that exists in ether, but it has an additional quality, which is touch, which doesn't exist in the ether. The next element is fire, which has sound and touch, but it also has an extra quality that doesn't exist in ether and air. That is form. The next element, which is even grosser, is water, which has sound, touch, and form, and one extra quality, which is taste, which is not there in the previous three. And finally, the grossest of the five elements is earth, which has sound, touch, form, taste, and also one extra quality, smell, which doesn't exist in the others. So in this way, we can see that earth has all the five qualities. Water has four, fire has three, air has two, ether has one. And the grosser it becomes, the larger the number of qualities. So this example is given to illustrate the principle of the five rasas. The five rasas are, as you know, Shanta, the rasa of neutrality, servitude. Yeah. Okay, I hope you can all see this. So we have the Shanta rasa, the neutrality. Essentially, this is engaging, or people who are at this level are those who are worshippers of the impersonal Brahman or the Paramatma, the super soul in the heart. And not everybody who worships the super soul or the impersonal Brahman is at this level. Only one in whose heart all material desires have ceased, and who has unflinching faith in Krishna or in the Supreme Lord, can qualify for Shantarasa, assuming he's gone all the way up from sadhana bhakti and upwards. So Shanta, in Shantarasa, there is an appreciation of the greatness of the Lord. One has strong faith, but a sense of service hasn't developed yet. So that's why it's called a neutral stage. So this person doesn't exactly engage in service to the Lord, but definitely there is the element, there is a feeling of how great the Lord is, how wonderful the Lord is. So a sense of greatness of the Lord is the defining characteristic of devotees who are in Shantarasa. So we may have examples like the four Kumaras or the nine Yogendras who were in this stage. So Shantarasa, you could say, for example, has one quality, that is a sense of greatness of the Lord. Then when they come to the point of love a little bit, and there is some sense of service that develops, then it transforms into the mood of servitorship to the Lord. It's called dasyaras. Dasya means servitude. And here there is a sense or a development of a spirit of service. This is when one actually starts serving the Lord. And in this, there is a sense of subordination, that there is awe and veneration. One clearly understands that the Lord is the master and I am the servant of the Lord. And with great joy, the devotee serves the Lord. So there is the quality of Shantarasa, which is a sense of greatness, but added to that is now a sense of service. So Dasyaras therefore has two qualities. The quality that exists in Shantaras, and also an extra quality, the sense of service, which doesn't exist in the Shantarasa. Then when the Dasya Rasa moves from love of Godhead to spontaneous love of Godhead, it goes even higher. The qualities of Dasya and Shanta remain, of course, the sense of greatness of the Lord and the sense of service, and they intensify. And when one comes to Sakhya, one actually imbibes a sense of intimacy without any sense of awe and veneration, of undeterred fraternity. Undeterred means without any impediment. Fraternity means friendship. So in this friendship, there is no deterrence because there is no sense of awe and reverence. And here we're specifically speaking of Vrindavan, because in other places outside of Vrindavan, and we'll come to that shortly, there is indeed some kind of a deterrent there. But in Vrindavan, there is no such deterrent. The cowherd boys, they love Krishna and play with him with a sense of equality. They will climb on his shoulders, joke with him, make fun of him, steal his prasadam, and they will do various things. Although they have enormous respect and love for Krishna. This sense of equality is not an irreverential, it may appear irreverential, but actually it is based on very, very deep, spontaneous love. Remember that all that we're talking about now, these 5 rasas, are on the platform of Prema Bhakti. We're not talking of Sadhana Bhakti anymore. So, Sakhya Rasa therefore has these 3 qualities: the sense of greatness of the Lord, the spirit of service to the Lord, and also the sense of intimacy devoid of awe and veneration. And as the spontaneous love of Sakyaras deepens, then there is Vatsalya Ras. Vatsalya means parental. And in addition to the qualities of the previous rasas, the devotee now develops a sense that he or she is superior to the Lord, not just equal, but superior, and feels that Krishna is dependent on me. So now there's a sense that one is a maintainer of the Lord. So there is a sense of greatness, a sense of service, a sense of intimacy, and something is added, a sense that one is the maintainer of the Lord. And finally, the topmost rasa is Madhurya Rasa, the conjugal love of Krishna with his devotees in that rasa. And this is characterized by even deeper, shall we say, exhibition of all the qualities that we saw earlier. And it is characterized by total self-surrender. It is very rare, and therefore it is considered the highest. So Madhurya Ras contains all the 5 qualities. Vatsalya Ras contains 4, Sakhya 3, Dasya 2, Shanta 1. So it was helpful to have this background when we'll come to Sakhya now, specifically when we're speaking of the qualities of Sakhya, the sense of equality, etc. So now I'll show you another. Now we'll be speaking of nectar of devotion. Can we have the next slide, please? We're talking of chapter 41 now. No, the other one. No, the other one. Yes. Okay. Sakyaras. So this chart has been drawn from the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 41. So if any of you have that in front of you, you can keep it, but it may be difficult for you to right away identify which part of the chart deals with which section. But I think this is a good study guide. So maybe sometime in the course of the week, starting today after this lecture, you could maybe sit with this chart and study chapter 41. Chapters 41 and 42 deal with fraternal devotion. So we will not have time to cover 42, but we'll just cover fraternal devotion, chapter 41, briefly. So in this chapter, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions that in Sakya Rasa, the friends of Krishna are called Vayasyas. The word Vaya or Vayaha or Vayam in Sanskrit means age. So Vayasya indicates one who's of the same age or similar age. Yes. So there will be some who are slightly younger, some who are more or less equal to him in age, and some who are slightly older to him. But they're more or less equal in age to him. So there are two types of such Vayasyas, friends of Krishna of the same age. The first are called Pura Vayasyas. Pura refers to town, like Dwarka Puri, Jagannath Puri. The word Puri or Pura refers to a town in the Sanskrit language. So here, Rupa Goswami is referring to the friends of Krishna in towns like Dwarka, Hastinapur, etc. And specifically, he mentions the Pandavas, Arjuna, Bhima, Yudhishthira, Nakul, Sahadev, and also interestingly, the wife Draupadi, who's also in the Dasyaras and in the Sakyaras, I beg your pardon. We spoke about Draupadi briefly a while ago. And we mentioned that even though that section generally pertains to the sadhana bhakti stage, but Draupadi is not to be considered at that stage, but still her example is used there because it is instructive and indicative. So Draupadi's example is used, and also Sudama Brahman. Sudama Vipra, the one who went to Dwarka. There's another cowherd boyfriend of Krishna who's Sudama. We shouldn't confuse the two. There's also another garland maker in Mathura who's Sudama. There's yet another Sudama. And this Sudama Brahman who is referred to here is the same Sudama who went to Dwarka with some chipped rice. He's also called Sridama Brahmana. And in Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada refers to him as Sridama. So Sudama Vipra has two names, Sridama as well as Sudama. So there's another Sridama in Vrindavan, so we shouldn't confuse the two. Okay, so these are the two. And there's quite a bit that Srila Prabhupada speaks about them. It'll be happy reading. You sit with this chart and you can read the Nectar of Devotion and you will really relish it. So as far as outside Vrindavan is concerned, that is the Pura Vayasyas, Srila Prabhupada here has mentioned that amongst all, he gives the example of how once when Krishna arrived in Indraprastha, then, which was the capital of the Kurus, then Maharaja Yudhishthira immediately came out and he smelled the flavor of Krishna's head. Generally, it's the Vedic custom that when an elder person welcomes a younger person, he smells his head. That's a part of the etiquette. So the subordinates, of course, offer respect. They offer obeisances, and the equals, the peers, they embrace each other. So that's generally how it happens. So Bhima and Arjuna, who are more or less of the same age, Bhima is slightly older though, but not much. And Arjuna is more or less the same age. So Bhima and Arjuna embraced him. And Nakul and Sahadev, who are slightly younger, they offered their obeisances, they offered their respect. And in this way, all the five Pandava brothers enjoyed the fraternal relationship of Krishna in transcendental mellow. Prabhupada also mentions here that of the five Pandavas, Arjuna is the most intimately connected with Krishna. And he goes on to describe something about Arjuna. We won't have time to discuss all of that, but suffice it to say, that's for the Pura Vayasyas. The other section of Krishna's Vayasya friends is the Vrajasakas. Sakha means a friend, but a very intimate friend, and Vraja means Vrindavan. So, Srila Rupa Goswami has classified the friends of Krishna in Vrindavan in four categories. Well-wishers, friends, friends here means ordinary friends, then confidential friends, and intimate friends. Intimate friends means very confidential friends. So the well-wishers are called suhrit in Sanskrit. Hrit means the heart, su means good. So those who are like well-wishers, to have good wishes for someone. You know, suhridam sarvabhutanam, suhridam sarvadehinam. Srila Prabhupada used to cite this word suhrit many times. So the suhrit Vrajasakas, the well-wishing friends of Krishna in Vrindavan, are slightly older than Krishna, and hence they have some degree of parental affection for him. Anyone who is older tends to have some kind of a mix in their friendship. It tends to have a little mix of some protective nature, protective feeling towards the younger friend. So that is the case here. So they always try to protect him. And that's all the examples are given here. But we won't have time, sorry, to go into that. The chief examples of Suhrits are Mandali Bhadra and Balabhadra. Balabhadra means Baladev, Balaram. Actually, maybe we'll just have a quick example of these two. So let's take one example of Mandali Bhadra's service attitude and his mood. That's on page 322. Mandali Bhadra says, "My dear friends, our beloved Krishna is now very tired from working with the cows in the pasturing grounds and from traveling all over the forests. I can see that he is very fatigued. Let me massage his head silently while he is taking rest in his house. And you, Subala, you just massage his thighs." So in this way, the slightly older friends of Krishna, like Mandali Bhadra, are a little protective of Krishna and they want to serve him like that. Similarly, Baladev, his older brother, has a similar mood. And Prabhupada quotes it, and Prabhupada describes it like this, quote, "My dear friend," this is Balaram speaking, "please inform Krishna not to go to Kaliya's lake today. Today is his birthday, and so I wish to go along with Mother Yashoda to bathe him. Tell him he should not leave the house today." Unquote. This shows how Balaram, Krishna's elder brother, took care of Krishna with parental love within the scope of fraternal affection. So it isn't the fraternal Sakyaras, but a slight mix of the parental mood also. And the other examples are Subhadra, Bhadravardhana, etc. And there are many others which are given by Srila Prabhupada here. The next category of Rajasakas are the friends, the ordinary friends. They are slightly younger than Krishna, and as opposed to the Suhrit, who are slightly older than Krishna. And they're very, very attached to him, and they render all sorts of service to him. Because they're slightly younger, in their friendship, we find a slight mix of the mood of servitude, dasya. Just as in the slightly older friends, there's a mix of the parental affection. In the slightly younger friends, there is a mix of the servitude sentiment that comes on. So let's see some examples of that. Ordinary friends. Yes, this is how Srila Prabhupada describes it. Sometimes some of them would rise early in the morning and immediately go to Krishna's place and wait at the door to see Krishna and to accompany him to the pasturing grounds. In the meantime, Krishna would be dressed by Mother Yashoda, and when she would see a boy standing at the door, she would call him, "Well, Vishal, why are you standing there? Come here." So, with the permission of Mother Yashoda, he would immediately enter the house, and while Mother Yashoda was dressing, he would try to help out on Krishna's ankle bells, and Krishna would jokingly strike him with his flute. Then Mother Yashoda would call, "Krishna, what is this? Why are you teasing your friend?" And Krishna would laugh, and the friend would also laugh. These are some of the activities of Krishna's sakhas. Sometimes the sakhas would take care of the cows who were going hither and thither. They would tell Krishna, "Your cows are going off here and there," and Krishna would thank them. Another example Srila Prabhupada gives is that since Krishna practically killed a demon every day in Vrindavan, he would sometimes feel a little tired or fatigued, and his hair would be scattered and so on. So it is these sakhas in particular who would come there and try to relieve him of his fatigue. You know, someone would take a fan of lotus leaves and fan him. Someone would brush the scattered hairs on Krishna's head, as someone would massage his body, and so on and so forth. So in this way, the sakhas, the ordinary friends, will serve Krishna in Vrindavan. The third category are the confidential friends, also called the Priyasakas. Now, these are almost exactly the same age as Krishna, and their behavior with Krishna on the basis of is on the basis of friendship on equal level, as opposed to the slight parental mix in the Suhrit and the servitude mix in the Sakas. So here there is complete equality, and therefore there is more freedom, there is more flexibility, shall we say, or less hindrance. Hmm? And the best, by the way, the sakhas, the examples, the chief is called Devaprastha, and other examples are Vishal, Vrishab, Ojasvi, and so on. So as far as the Priya sakhas, or the confidential friends, are concerned, the chief is Sridama. And others, examples are Sudama, Dama, Vasudama, Stoka Krishna, Bhadrasen, Madhumangal. So Madhumangal is a famous laddu lover who loves to eat laddus. He's a Brahmana boy, and he brings in some, shall we say, humor and laughter into Krishna's pastimes. Since he's very fond of laddus and he eats more than anyone, and when he wants more laddus, then he would tell Krishna that if you give me one more laddu, then I will be pleased with you and give you blessings, so that your friend Radharani will be pleased with you. And then Krishna would happily give him some extra laddus, and then Madhumangal would bless him, and everybody would laugh. So Madhumangal is also one of the Priya Sakhas that Srila Prabhupada mentions here. And some of the other thing, one of the pastimes that is mentioned here is that a friend of Srimati Radharani told Radharani, "My dear graceful Radharani, your intimate friend Krishna is also served by his intimate boyfriends. Some of them cut jokes with him in mild voices and please him very much by this." So the gopis also understand that these Priya Sakhas, they are very, very dear to Krishna, and they please him in so many wonderful ways. Another example of this is given by Srila Prabhupada here, that sometimes a confidential friend would come before Krishna and embrace him with great affection and love. Another friend would then come up from the rear and cover Krishna's eyes with his hands. Krishna would always feel very happy by such dealings with his confidential friends. Now we come to the fourth category, which is the Priya Narmasakas, the intimate friends, who are the most confidential friends. And amongst the devotees in the Sakya Rasa, they are considered the most exalted. The reason being that they are involved very much, and sometimes they act as go-betweens in the pastimes of Krishna and the gopis. So they will pass messages and gifts and so on back and forth between the two. And so they have to be so confidential that the matter is not revealed to anyone, even the other cowherd boys, because for them it may be a bit of a confusion. But for these cowherd boys who are Priya Narmasakas, the most intimate friends, they are quite comfortable in straddling their relationship with Krishna and in assisting Krishna in his relationship with the gopis. The example of this, the chief examples are Subala and Ujjvala. Other examples are Arjuna, Gandharva, Vasanta, etc. This Arjuna, mind you, is not the same Arjuna as the one in Bhagavad Gita. That is the Arjuna of Hastinapur. This is the Arjuna of the cowherd boy of Vrindavan. So here is some example. One gopi, I quote Srila Prabhupada saying here, one gopi addressed Radharani thus, "My dear Krishangi, O delicate one, just see how Subal is whispering your message into Krishna's ear, how he is delivering the confidential letter of Shama Dasi silently into Krishna's hand, how he is delivering the betel nuts prepared by Palika into Krishna's mouth, and how he is decorating Krishna with the garland prepared by Taraka. Did you know, my dear friend, that all these most intimate friends of Krishna are always engaged in his service in this way?" So this is the kind of service that the Priya Narma Sakhas, they render to Krishna. So in this way, we see the classification of the Vayasyas, the devotees on the exalted platform of Prema, who serve Krishna in the mood of Sakyaras. And finally, just one last, please, the other chart. Yes, so Srila Prabhupada concludes this chapter more or less by speaking about the three divisions of Krishna's friends. One are Nitya Siddha, eternally perfect. That means that they have descended with Krishna from the spiritual world, from Goloka Vrindavan, to assist in Krishna's pastimes here in the earthly Vrindavan, the Bhauma Vrindavan, that Vrindavan which is manifested on earth. Then you have Devata, which means they were formerly demigods, they were quite exalted devotees, but now they have been elevated to the stage of perfection and they have become sakhas, or they become friends of the Lord in Vrindavan. But they're also sadhana siddha because they have perfected their life by rigorous practice of devotional service. And the third category is sadhana siddha, who have perfected their devotional service through practice and moving through sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, prema bhakti, and so on. So these are the three divisions of Krishna's friends. So I'll just conclude with one verse and then I'll show you some pictures. So this is a verse from the 12th chapter of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, text 11, which explains how fortunate the cowherd boys of Vrindavan are. Ittam satam brahma sukhanubhutya dasyam gatanam paradevatena maya shritanam naradarakena Sakam Vijaru Krita Punya Punja. So there are some. Now, this is with reference to the cowherd boys of Vrindavan. Now, as far as those who are, worshipping the impersonal Brahman, the Gyanis, and so on, who are after uh, the happiness, so-called happiness of merging into the impersonal Brahman. For them, Krishna is that impersonal Brahman. So they think of Krishna in those terms, as the source of that, or as the light himself. Then there are those who are serving Krishna in the mood of servitude. Dasyam Gatanam Paradaivatena. They think of Krishna as their worshipable Lord. Then Maya Shritanam, those who are under the grip of Maya, the illusory energy, Naradarakena, they think of Krishna as being just an ordinary human child. Sakam Vijaharu Krita Punja. But what about these cowherd boys? They have got a chance to play with Krishna on equal terms with such intimacy that is quite unimaginable for anybody else. So, what kind of piety, devotional piety, must they have accumulated over so many lifetimes that they have now got this opportunity to do this? So, this is a glorification of the cowherd boys who exemplify the Sakyaras in Vrindavan. And to end, I'll just show you some pictures. Yashodadulal Prabhu, I'm just a few minutes over time. Is it okay if I take 2 minutes more for the pictures?
Please take as much time as you want, Maharaj.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so these are some pictures of friendship with the Lord. This is Krishna and Arjuna. You remember that Arjuna is Krishna's dearest friend amongst all the Pandavas. Next is Krishna with the Pandavas and with Draupadi. You all recognize this pastime, the pastime of the Akshaya Patra, when Durvasa Muni came to Kamyavan, when the Pandavas were in exile there. And he came and Draupadi had already eaten from this pot. And Durvasa Muni, they had to cook now for 10,000 people who were along with Durvasa as well. And they had no food. And Draupadi called out for Krishna, and Krishna came and he ate that little grain of rice, and immediately the Akshay Patra, or rather Durvasa Muni and his disciples were all very full and they left. So all of these personalities that you see here, the 5 Pandavas and Draupadi, are in the Sakyaras with Krishna. Next. Lord Krishna with Draupadi, another picture. Okay, next. Yes, another Puravayasya, meaning a friend of Krishna from the towns. So from Dwarka, this is Krishna serving his dear friend Sudama, much to the astonishment of his queen Rukmini Devi, who is wondering how it is that her husband is doing such menial service to a simple, poor Brahmana like Sudama. This is another example of how Krishna is won over by the love of his devotees. Okay, next please. So, Krishna getting ready to go to the forest. If you remember, I read out a small section of the Nectar of Devotion dealing with exactly this. This picture actually illustrates that point about how this boy is Vishal, and he was standing at the door like the other boys, and Krishna, Mother Yashoda is dressing Krishna. And so Mother Yashoda spots him at the door and calls him, Vishal, come inside. And Vishal quickly comes in and then starts assisting Mother Yashoda in dressing Krishna and tying his anklets and so on. So that is exactly the picture that corresponds to that little section that I read. So these are the sakhas, the ordinary friends. This is the kind of service that they do. Next, please. Krishna with the other gopas, they go out into the forest. They're enjoying themselves. It's just ecstatic bliss all day long. They're just frolicking, having fun, playing games, eating all sorts of delicious fruits and roots and berries from the forest, in addition to whatever delicious foodstuffs their respective mothers have sent with them. And they have a wonderful time, in short. Yes, next, please. Yeah, they do things like this in Sakyaras. They imitate the peacocks, they tease the monkeys, they imitate the frogs, they do all sorts of things like this. This goes on in the spiritual world. Sometimes people ask, okay, what will you do when you go to the spiritual world? Won't life be boring? For those who enter into Krishna's Sakyaras pastime, they'll be doing this. And they'll be imitating the peacocks, and they'll be going out to graze cows with Krishna and so on. Okay, next, please. Yeah, and these are some other pastimes that Krishna plays with his, in the Sakyaras, playing the swing with the Sakhas. Okay, next, please. The killing of Aghasura. Yes, this was actually when Krishna faces the Asuras, the other cowherd boys. They just become so distraught with nervousness and grief and pain, and especially when they see that Krishna has entered into the mouth of a demon like Bakasura, or as in this case, Aghasura, then they almost faint. So the bond is so close with them. Okay, next, please. Yes, and then when they go to the forest and they have a good time with a nice picnic, they have delicious foodstuffs, simple foodstuffs. And then you can see in the background, in the sky, there's Brahma seated on his swan carrier. And he gets a little bewildered because Krishna, you can see he's carrying foodstuffs in both his hands, right and left. It's not considered a cultured thing to do, to eat food with the left hand. And Krishna was eating ordinary food like yogurt and fruit and rice and things like that. And Brahma was expecting that the Supreme Lord should have some kind of a very gorgeous spread, a meal with so many different types of items and so on. And he's quite surprised to see Krishna and the cowherd boy sharing this kind of simple meal. Next, please. Yeah, similar instance as in Bakasura, as in Aghasura. And the cowherd boys are participating with Krishna in all these beautiful pastimes. Yes, please. Vatsasura, where a demon comes dressed as a calf and they're playing games. And sometimes Krishna loses also and he gets punished. So Krishna does all of these things. So this is why it is called Vishrambha Sakhya. Vishrambha means that which is completely devoid of awe and veneration. Although Arjuna would sometimes do that, as the Nectar of Devotion says at one place, that he would sometimes lie down with his head on Krishna's lap and they would joke and laugh and so on. So there was certainly quite a degree of intimacy between Arjuna and Krishna. But when Arjuna saw the universal form, he became stunned. And the sweetness of his Sakyaras became compromised. So Arjuna's Sakhya is called Sambhrama Sakhya or Gaurava Sakhya, which is tinged with awe and veneration, but not so with the cowherd boys here in Vrindavan, where there is no trace of any awe and veneration. Even though they respect him a lot, they love him, to a degree we cannot imagine. But there is total freedom in interacting. So sometimes Krishna gets punished; he has to carry somebody else on his shoulders, and these are the pastimes that go on here. Done? Okay, so that's it. So I'll stop my class here, and I think we have questions, right?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. That was so relishable. We did not want it to stop, actually. I'm going to take 2 minutes to make a couple of quick announcements, and then we will come to the questions, which I've started gathering. So I'll share my screen, but before I do that, one of our co-hosts, Gaur Kumar, it's his birthday today. So if everyone can wish him happy birthday and pray for his good health and Krishna consciousness, that would be fantastic. So let me share my
Yeah.
screen. Okay, so this is session 9 of the 10-part series on the 9 processes of bhakti. We started with His Holiness Raghunath Swami and then went through several wonderful speakers, two of whom are actually on the in the audience right now on Zoom, Sri Prahlad Prabhu and Archana Siddhi Devi. They're both here. They've been attending every single session. And today we have session 9 with His Holiness Bhakti Rasamrita Swami. This series is organized by the Bhakti Center and it is co-hosted by several ISKCON centers in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, and New York. So you can see their names and their websites here. Each of these centers has some wonderful Krishna Katha going on their own Zoom Sangha. So please check out their websites. They have some fabulous speakers. Most of them have programs on Saturdays, Sundays, sometimes in the middle of the week. Tobacco, of course, the first one has Sangha 6 days a week, but they all have wonderful sessions, so please check out their websites. The next session and the last one in the Pathways to Perfection series is by His Holiness Satchidananda Swami. He needs no introduction. He is going to round up the 10-part series by speaking about Atma Nivedanam, or surrendering everything to the Lord. It'll be at the same time, 9 a.m. in New York, 6 a.m. Pacific time, and various global times. We had a time change in America, so some of the times have changed. So India, for example, is 7:30 now. Dubai is 6 p.m. and Singapore is 10 p.m. So please check your local times compared to 9 a.m. New York. I did announce last week that we were going to have 2 bonus sessions because it is Karthik and we cannot have 2 empty Saturdays with no Krishna Katha. And I'm happy to say that all the centers that are co-hosting along with the Bhakti Center for this series have happily agreed to co-host for the next 2 sessions. The first of which is by Dinabandhu Prabhu, and it's a small mini series, 2-part series. We're calling it Vrindavan Mellows, Krishna in Braj. And so Dinabandhu Prabhu is going to speak about the pastime of Radharani becoming a Gopa, the pastime of Gopashtami. That's next Saturday after Satchidananda Swami, so 2 Saturdays from now. And then the final Saturday of Kartik, we're going to have Madhavananda Prabhu, who is going to speak about who is really Krishna's mother. So he's going to speak about Mother Yashoda and Devki Devi and others. So tune in for both of these bonus sessions. But of course, next Saturday is His Holiness Satchidananda Swami. So with that, I would like to ask questions now. So the first question comes from Archana Siddhi Devi. Can you speak about how Prahlad Maharaj is cited by Sanatana Goswami as an example of Shantaras? Trying to understand why Prahlad Maharaj is cited as an example of Shantaras, since he was active in serving the Lord, preaching, praying, remembering, etc.
Yes, he has not been mentioned as an example of Sakhya, definitely not. Because his devotional service was more or less in appreciation of the various qualities of the Lord. He was preaching, yes, as an active devotee of the Lord, but because his service was not at that intimate level as, say, Arjuna or the Brajabasis. You know, there's a hierarchy in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Sanatana Goswami speaks of a hierarchy. And that also pertains to the diagram that I showed. You know, all the Prahladas, remember that all these devotees that we're talking about are on the platform of prema. Yes, so they're all pure devotees. There's no question of that. It's only that on that platform of pure devotion, and there is a gradation, there is a difference in intensity, in sweetness, in the way that their mood manifests. So some of the elements that constitute that element of intimacy, that element of spontaneous devotion that characterizes Sakyaras probably is not there to that degree. So that's why I guess it's mentioned like that.
Thank you, Maharaj. So the next question is from someone who wants to remain anonymous. While trying to remember that Krishna is our ever well-wishing friend and to practice friendly dealings with him and his devotees, how do we avoid the kind of familiarity that breeds contempt? For example, how do the great souls express their love for him in friendly dealings with him on an intimate level, free of awe and reverence, and not get too familiar? What can we learn from them?
You know, one has to act according to one's position. One cannot act at a level beyond that, because if even in ordinary dealings, let's say, you know, depending on your level and the quality of relationship that we have with somebody, we will display only that much of familiarity with that person. If you're very close to someone, very intimate, then the degree of familiarity we exhibit will be greater. So to the extent that we have actually developed that degree of intimacy with the Lord, then that familiarity will automatically come. As we heard in that quote from the Agastya Samhita, where the devotee goes and lies down in the temple, whereas it's against the rules to, you know, go and stretch yourself out like that in the temple. And that was in Maitri Sakya. Yes. So that cannot be artificially imitated. And that, in fact, is Rupa Goswami cautions us against that. And then Jiva Goswami in his commentary gives the entire list of seva aparads, which Srila Prabhupada reproduces in the Nectar of Devotion. So we have to act according to our adhikar in dealing with the Lord. You know, so that is why, especially to guard against artificial familiarity, we are warned to follow certain rules and worship the deities, even of Radha and Krishna, in the mood of Lakshmi and Narayan. So when the deities of Radha and Krishna are worshipped in spontaneous love, like Sanatana Goswami would worship his deity of Madan Gopal or Madan Mohan, that was one thing. But when we worship the deities in our temples, then we have to worship with within a set of rules. Of course, there is devotion. There is internally there could be some more deeper feeling and attachment to the deities, and one may exchange feelings with the deities, and you know all that is welcome and it's encouraged actually. But nevertheless, one has to limit oneself to a certain decorum that is required. Automatically, as we move on, it should come, but we cannot imitate these things.
So on a related level, Maharaj, question from Subal Priya Prabhu: how to practice Sakhyam, or is it possible to practice Sakhyam, like, for example, we practice Shravanam by consciously hearing?
Yes, yes. And by the way, the Maitri that I mentioned about, you know, in the 48th element of sadhana bhakti that I started off my talk with, and that Sakhyam there had two elements, Vishwas and Maitri. And Maitri is actually Raganuga, where that's the kind of thing. So preaching Krishna consciousness is actually like that. Yeah, one may not be situated on the Raganuga platform, but the act of just spontaneously going out and giving Krishna consciousness to everyone is something like that, which is why, interestingly, Srila Prabhupada mentions that the preacher is also like a well-wisher of Krishna, right? And the first one is Vishwas, to have strong faith. So how we cultivate, just like Shravanam is cultivated by you hear more and more and more. Similarly for Vishwas Sakhyam, what we do is to just follow the rules and regulations and continue increasing our faith that simply by serving Krishna like this, everything will be achieved. And Krishna is our true well-wisher, our true benefactor. And when we have this mood towards Krishna and we serve him like that, then we are actually deepening our Sakhyam with him.
Thank you, Maharaj. Gopika Kanta from New Jersey asks, would friendship with devotees be considered Sakhyam, or is this limb just in direct connection with Krishna?
Well, it's also in connection with Krishna, yes. Because you see, later on, when Rupa Goswami speaks about impetuses or stimuli for our Sakhya, for the Sakhya Ras, he speaks not only about Krishna and Krishna's playing the flute or Krishna's, performing so many other acts, his clothing, etc., but also Krishna's cowherd boyfriends, the Sakhas. So even meditating on or looking on or hearing about the cowherd boys, the Braja Sakhas of Vrindavan, can also be a stimulant or an impetus for the Sakhya Bhav. So we see that in keeping with the idea of Tadiya, that is in connection with, definitely developing friendship with Krishna also includes developing friendship with Krishna's devotees. And having that faith that Krishna's devotees are our real well-wishers. They're our real benefactors. This is our real family, the family of devotees.
Thank you, Maharaj. So on that, a related question from Karuna Avatar Prabhu. He says, you're so beautifully and clearly described the rasa of friendship between the Lord and his devotee, and you just spoke about friendship among devotees. What does one do so that one can become a worthy friend in Krishna consciousness?
A friend in need is a friend indeed, right? So, what is the greatest need in our life? Krishna consciousness. So, real friend is one who assists us, who encourages us, who motivates us, supports us in our Krishna consciousness. So, the best way to develop friendship amongst devotees is to help each other develop Krishna consciousness. Of course, one also has to be sensitive to practical realities that exist in that devotee's life. There are times when you may need to speak other things than just chant Hare Krishna Prabhu, it'll be okay. That certainly is a fundamental instruction or or advice in any circumstance. But there may be also in the course of helping the devotees or serving them, other factors that of a practical nature that we may need to consider also.
Thank you, Maharaj. So one question came from Ramya Vrindavan Devi. If the four Kumaras are in Shantaras, how come they were chosen to be one of the initial recipients of transcendental knowledge and to become the primary acharyas of a Vaishnava Sampradaya?
These are all pure devotees. They're not ordinary souls, right? And so they've been chosen by the Lord because of their purity, because of their devotion. Um, so they're all in different bhavas. It's not that all the four sampradayas are in the same bhava. The Vraja bhava is not found everywhere. The mood of Vrindavan is not found everywhere. So every sampradaya has its own unique flavor. So the acharya, the sampradaya acharya, will naturally reflect that in his or her, as the case may be. Lakshmi, she's also the founder of an sampradaya, in their mood of service. But Vrajabhav is rare, the mood of Vrindavan. The four Kumaras were in the mood of Vaikuntha, as is Lakshmi Devi.
Thank you, Maharaj. One question came from someone who wants to remain anonymous. In addition to faithfully following rules and regulations, are there specific practices that we can do to foster this friendly spirit within our heart? This person who wrote the question, he's thinking here of practices that some devotees have of doing things like writing letters to the deity, bringing gifts for the deities, having more so-called conversational prayer time with Krishna, etc. These things are not necessarily mentioned in the list of angas in Nectar of Devotion, but can they be included to foster our own feeling of serving Krishna in a mood of friendship and feeling his friendship in our heart?
Most certainly, yes. And these are excellent ideas. And that's precisely the kind of things that all devotees can easily do. In fact, everywhere I travel, I also suggest to the temple presidents or managers that they should actually read regular reports of the temple's activities to the deities. The temple president, perhaps accompanied by any of their council members or whatever, should stand in front of the deities and actually read and explain what happened, speak as if you're speaking to someone who's in front of you, and the deity is not just a statue, right? They're the Supreme Lord themselves. So we stand there in front of the deities and we actually speak and read out, this happened, these are the accounts for the last month, my Lord, or my Lordship. Please, this is for your pleasure. And also we conducted such and such program this, in the last month for your pleasure. And these are the events that happened here, and this happened, that happened. You can just tell them because they are the Lord of the temple, they're Lord of our lives. So they should be informed of what's happening. And in that sense, we also develop that intimacy. So whether one is a manager or a president or a preacher or just any devotee at a personal level can also do such things. Actually, it is said in the Nectar of Devotion also that every time one goes to the temple or to see the deity of the Lord, one should not go empty-handed. One should go with at least a flower, if nothing, a tulsi leaf, and maybe offer a donation if that's possible, but otherwise no problem. Even one doesn't have money, just go with a flower, go with the fruit, somehow. Of course, if somehow one is not able to do even that, then just anyway go with a very devoted heart and offer that to Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Can we go on for a few more minutes, 5 minutes maybe?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Gail from New Jersey has a question. What is the difference between general friendship, where one wants to serve Krishna by doing things like introducing people to Krishna consciousness, etc., and the dasyam that we are trying to cultivate by practicing sadhana bhakti? Or how are they related?
Well, dasyam underlies rather the spirit of service underlies all the rasas, mellows from dasyam upwards. If you remember, that was the one extra characteristic there in the dasiras that doesn't exist in the Shantaras. And then this characteristic exists in the other rasas that come at a higher level, but those rasas have other qualities also. So the spirit of service is definitely there. So the element of dasya should be there for all devotees. We are ultimately servant of Krishna, servant of the Guru, servant of the Vaishnavas. So that is there. So there's no contradiction there. When it comes to developing the friendship, we are serving in a mode of friendship. And the friendship has not to be a selfish friendship. It has not to be a compromised friendship. It's a friendship of real, of good wishes, of a genuine heart towards Krishna. That one sincerely wants to do something for Krishna. One sincerely wants to bring some devotees to Krishna's lotus feet. So it is in this sense that I presume that Srila Prabhupada mentioned the preacher as an example of a well-wisher of Krishna in that section.
Thank you, Maharaj. So, two related questions from two different devotees. One is from Rishikesh Prabhu. Is our relationship with the Lord revealed eventually, or is it something that one chooses? And related to that is Chandan from Mexico, who writes, can we end up in a different rasa from the mood in which our guru is at?
I'll answer the second one first. Can a devotee, can a disciple end up, that means at the stage of Swarup Siddhi, at that stage of ultimate perfection of life, can the disciple end up in a different rasa than the guru? It is possible. It is entirely possible. And there are many, many instances of that as well. Coming to the first question, of course, generally, the mood will be similar, but it is entirely possible that there could be other options also. So regarding our own position, it will be revealed at the right time by Krishna. When we become sufficiently elevated in devotional service, that is when Krishna will reveal to us our our particular status in the spiritual world, whenever that time may come. This lifetime or next lifetime, whenever, it may come. Of course, we can aspire. We can aspire. That is exactly what Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti is about. Raga and Anuga. Anuga means one who is a follower. One follows the Raga Bhaktas. He follows in the footsteps of the Vraja devotees, and tries to cultivate that mood. That's also possible. The devotees may do that as an internal cultivation if they like.
Thank you, Maharaj. Since we are about 6 minutes over time, we would like to conclude here. My apologies to anyone whose question did not get asked. We ran out of time. And our sincere gratitude again to Maharaj. Maharaj, there are a lot of chat messages both here on Zoom as well as privately and on YouTube that we are seeing, expressing gratitude and appreciation to you. And from all of us who are co-hosting here, Bhakti Center and the other temples, we are very grateful to you for taking your valuable time. I know you're asked to speak at so many forums and you give lectures regularly. So thank you so much for doing that. I would at the end open up Zoom so that devotees can say Haribol and thank you to Maharaj briefly. But before that, I would like to point out that if people want to follow what is happening at the Bhakti Center and be made aware of those events, they can subscribe to our newsletter, The Temple at the Bhakti Center, and Daniel Prabhu, who's one of our organizers, is going to put all the links in the chat. So they can subscribe to the newsletter or subscribe on WhatsApp. And of course, we have our YouTube channel. It's called Temple at Bhakti Center. And we are on Instagram, as well as you can check us out at bhakticenter.org, bhakticenter.org. And there are several groups that you can join: Beginning Bhakti, Growing Bhakti. These are like community groups, or what in the real world or physical world might be called Bhakti Vrikshas in a different form. But these are groups that you can join, and you can cultivate your own friendships with other like-minded souls and cultivate your devotion by joining any of these groups. So you can see the links in the Zoom chat box that Daniel put. And with that, I would like to request our organizing host, Daniel Prabhu, to open up the mute button so that everyone can say Haribol to Maharaj. Thank you again so much, Maharaj.
Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me an opportunity.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj, for giving such a nice lecture.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna.
Krishna Dandavat All Maharaj.
Thank you much.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj ji. Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you all very much.
Hare
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you again.
Hare Krishna. Haribol.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.